I was born without arms and without legs. And for many years, I thought my life was over before it even started. I remember as a little boy looking at other kids running, climbing, doing all the things I couldn't do. And inside me, there was this ache, this voice that said, Nick, you'll never have what they have. You'll never be enough. There were nights when I cried myself to sleep, wishing I could just wake up and be normal. I thought about giving up, because what future could there possibly be for someone like me? But here's what I discovered. When life takes away something you thought you needed, it's only clearing space for you to discover something greater. Hope. Hope became my lifeline. Not because my circumstances changed, but because I changed. I realized that even though I had no arms to hold on with, I could still hold on to faith. Even though I had no legs to walk on, I could still move forward with courage. And even though I felt broken, I learned that broken crayons still color. Don't lose hope. Not because life is easy, not because pain isn't real, but because your story is not finished yet. I'm standing here, not as a man who has everything figured out, but as proof that no matter how dark it gets, there is always a light worth reaching for. And if a man without arms and legs can find purpose, joy, and meaning, then so can you. When I was a little boy, I looked in the mirror and I didn't see a future. I saw a body without arms, without legs, and I wondered if I would ever have a normal life. I couldn't play soccer with the other boys. I couldn't hold my mother's hand. I couldn't tie my shoes or feed myself. Every simple task that seemed automatic for others was a reminder of what I didn't have. And I'll be honest with you, those reminders hurt. They cut deep. I used to ask myself the same questions over and over again. Why was I born like this? What purpose could there be in a life so limited? I thought my biggest challenges were punishments, proof that I didn't belong in the world. But here's what I learned through the tears, the bullying, and the sleepless nights. Those very challenges that made me feel broken were shaping me for something greater. My pain was preparing me. It was chiseling away the doubts, carving out character, and forcing me to see beyond the surface. You see, when life strips you of what everyone else takes for granted, you are forced to discover the strength that nobody can see. My disability didn't define me, it refined me. There were moments at school when kids laughed at me, pointed fingers, and whispered about how strange I looked. I hated walking into classrooms because I felt like an alien, like a mistake. At home, I cried on my pillow, asking God why He gave me more than I could handle. But it was in those quiet, lonely moments that I discovered something powerful. I realized I had a choice. I could let my challenges convince me that I was worthless, or I could let them teach me resilience. And resilience doesn't come when everything is easy. It comes when life forces you to fight for hope, when it pushes you to dig deeper than you ever thought possible. One of the turning points in my life was when I started speaking to small groups. At first, I didn't think I had anything to say. I mean, what could a boy without arms and legs teach anyone? But when I stood in front of people and shared my story, I saw their eyes fill with tears. I realized that the very things I thought made me useless were actually the things that gave my words power. My challenges became the bridge between my story and someone else's healing. And that's when I understood our biggest struggles are often the tools that prepare us to lift others. I won't tell you that I don't still have difficult days. There are mornings when the reality of my situation hits me all over again. But instead of seeing it as a curse, I see it as my classroom. Every obstacle teaches me something new. Patience, humility, creativity. Do. You know how many times I failed at learning how to brush my teeth, type on a keyboard, or swim? Dozens, hundreds. And yet, in every failure, I was being trained for perseverance. Every setback was shaping a strength that I would later need. When I stood on my wedding day looking at the woman I love, I thought back to the moments when I believed I'd never be loved. When I held my first child against my shoulder, I thought of the days when I believed I'd never even have a family, and I realized something profound. The very things that once made me cry myself to sleep were the things that built the man strong enough to receive blessings I couldn't imagine as a boy. So if you're sitting here tonight and thinking your challenges have disqualified you, let me tell you the truth. They're qualifying you. They're shaping you into someone stronger, wiser, and more compassionate than you could ever be without the pain. Your obstacles are not walls meant to stop you. They are weights meant to strengthen you. The struggle you face is not your identity. It is your training ground. I want you to hear this clearly. Your challenges do not define you. They prepare you. The world may see your scars and call you weak, but those scars are proof that you survived. They're proof that you're still here. And if you're still here, there is more for you to live for, more for you to give, more for you to become. My life without arms and legs may look like the greatest limitation, but it has been the greatest gift. Because without my challenges, I would never have discovered the strength of hope. Without my pain, I would never have known the depth of joy. And without my struggles, I would never have been prepared to stand here and tell you this. Don't run from your challenges. Embrace them. Learn from them. Because one day, you'll look back and realize they weren't holding you back at all. They were lifting you up. When I was a teenager, there was a season in my life where hope felt like it had completely abandoned me. I could look at my body and see everything I was missing, but I couldn't see anything ahead of me. I remember one particular day sitting in my room, staring out the window, and all I could think was, Nick, this is it. This is your life. You'll never get married. You'll never have a career. You'll never be happy. And when you start to believe those lies, the weight gets heavier and heavier until you wonder if it's even worth carrying on. There was a moment when I felt so crushed by my circumstances that I thought about giving up entirely. I thought if this was all life had to offer me, maybe I didn't want it anymore. And that's when I realized something. When you run out of strength, the only thing that can keep you alive is hope. Hope doesn't erase the pain, but it whispers that tomorrow might be different. Hope doesn't make life easy, but it gives you a reason to take the next step. And for me, hope became stronger than the reality I was living in. I want you to understand, nothing about my situation changed overnight. I still woke up the next morning without arms and legs. I still had to face bullying, loneliness, and the endless list of things I couldn't do. But hope shifted something inside me. Instead of asking, why me? I started asking, what if? What if my life could have meaning? What if my struggle could be used for something greater? What if I could inspire even one person not to quit? Those what ifs became the cracks where the light of hope began to shine through. Circumstances are powerful, but they are not permanent. And when hope shows up, even in the smallest spark, it can break through the darkest night. For me, it started with a choice. The choice to believe that my story wasn't finished yet. And once I made that choice, I began to see opportunities where I used to see only dead ends. Instead of focusing on the fact that I couldn't hold a pen with hands I didn't have, I focused on the fact that I could type with my toes. Instead of dwelling on the fact that I couldn't play sports like the other kids, I focused on the fact that I could swim. Hope didn't give me arms and legs, but it gave me vision. I'll never forget the first time I spoke to a group of students. I told them my story, and after I finished, a young man came up to me with tears in his eyes. He said, Nick, you've helped me see that I don't need to give up. In that moment, I understood the power of hope, not just for me, but for others. My circumstances hadn't changed, but hope had given me the courage to change someone else's. And that's when I knew hope is contagious. When you dare to hold on to it, you give others permission to do the same. Think about this. Storms come and go. They might shake you, they might scare you, but they don't last forever. Circumstances are the same way. You may be in the middle of one right now that feels unbearable. Maybe it's sickness, maybe it's loss, maybe it's rejection. And it's so tempting to look at where you are and assume that's where you'll always be. But let me tell you from my own story. Where you are is not who you are, and it's not where you'll always stay. Hope gives you eyes to see beyond the storm, to believe that there's something on the other side worth holding out for. The truth is, hope has carried me to places my body never could. It carried me to stages in front of millions of people. It carried me into a marriage I once believed was impossible. It carried me into the joy of holding my children, even without arms. Hope took me further than circumstance ever could, because circumstance limits you, but hope frees you. So if you feel like your circumstances are burying you right now, I want to remind you, hope is stronger. It doesn't mean everything will suddenly be perfect, but it means you don't have to quit in the middle of the fight. It means tomorrow has possibilities that today cannot see. It means the end of your rope is not the end of your story. I stand here not because my circumstances ever became easy, but because hope taught me that even without arms and legs, I could fly further than I ever dreamed. And if hope could do that for me, then I know it can do that for you. There was a time when I believed that my life had no possibilities. How could a boy without arms and legs ever have a future? I couldn't drive a car, I couldn't play sports, I couldn't even hold a spoon. Every direction I looked, I saw doors closed, opportunities locked, and dreams slipping away. But what I didn't understand then was that faith and resilience have the power to create opportunities that don't even exist yet. And when you mix those two together, faith to believe in what you cannot yet see, and resilience to keep moving forward no matter how many times you fall, you begin to see a different kind of life. I didn't become a speaker because someone offered me a stage one day. I didn't wake up one morning and suddenly have people lining up to hear me talk. In fact, the first time I ever stood up to speak, it was to a tiny group of high school students. I was terrified. I thought, why would anyone listen to a guy who looks like me? But I made a choice to believe that maybe, just maybe, my story could mean something to someone else. That's faith. Faith isn't always this huge, unshakable force. Sometimes it's just that small whisper that says, try again, take one more step. And when I took that step, something incredible happened. Students began to cry. They came up to me afterward and told me that my words gave them hope. That's when I realized that my brokenness was not a barrier. It was a bridge. Faith allowed me to see that what I thought disqualified me was actually the very thing that qualified me to speak into people's lives. And resilience kept me going when it was hard. Because the truth is, not every talk went well. There were times people didn't respond, times I doubted myself all over again. But I kept showing up. I kept trying. And that resilience slowly built into momentum that carried me to stages all around the world. Faith and resilience don't erase your problems, but they give you the strength to walk through them differently. I had to learn that my body was never going to change. I was never going to grow arms and legs. But my perspective could change. And when I started seeing life not as a series of closed doors, but as an open invitation to create new ones, everything shifted. I couldn't open jars in the kitchen, but I could open hearts in an audience. I couldn't run in a marathon, but I could run toward people drowning in hopelessness and tell them they weren't alone. Faith made me see it, and resilience made me pursue it until it became real. There were countless times people told me no. They said, Nick, you can't do that. You can't swim. You can't travel. You can't live independently. You can't speak to big crowds. And every no was another wall in front of me. But here's what faith and resilience taught me. Walls are not there to stop you, they're there to test how badly you want what's on the other side. Every time I hit a wall, I ask myself, is this where I stop or is this where I grow? And with faith in my heart, I chose to grow. That's how I learned to swim. That's how I learned to type. That's how I learned to travel alone, live without depending on others for every need. I didn't succeed the first time, I failed again and again. But resilience says failure is not final. Resilience says get up one more time, try again, believe again. And when you pair that with faith, you start to see new possibilities bloom where before there was only dust. One of the greatest miracles in my life is my family. There was a time when I believed no woman could ever love me. I thought I'd never get married, never hold a child, never build a home. But faith told me not to give up on love, and resilience kept me from retreating into loneliness. And then, when the time was right, I met the most beautiful woman who saw past my body and straight into my heart. Today, we have children who run into my arms, or into my shoulder really, and call me Dad. That is the fruit of faith and resilience, creating a possibility that once felt impossible. And I want you to hear this. Your situation may feel like a dead end, but it's not the end. Faith will give you the vision to see a way forward, and resilience will give you the strength to walk it out step by step. The combination of those two is unstoppable. You might not have the resources, you might not have the support, you might not even know the how, but if you have faith to see and resilience to keep going, the how will come. Doors will open, people will show up, opportunities will be created. My life is proof of this. The boy who once wished he could disappear became a man traveling to over 70 countries, speaking to millions of people, and holding a family I once thought was impossible. Not because circumstances changed, but because faith and resilience created new possibilities. So don't quit where you are. Don't let the walls in front of you convince you that you are stuck forever. Remember this, faith sees the invisible, resilience does the impossible, and together they can take your greatest impossibility and turn it into your greatest testimony. When I was a child, I remember waking up some mornings and refusing to go to school. I didn't want to face the stares, the whispers, the pointing fingers. I didn't want to deal with kids asking questions like, "What happened to you?" Or worse, laughing at me as if I was some kind of joke. And the truth is, I couldn't change my body. I couldn't wake up with arms and legs, no matter how much I prayed or wished for it. My situation was out of my control. But what I came to realize is that while I couldn't always choose my circumstances, I could choose my response. That lesson didn't come easily. There were days I wanted to shut the world out, to hide in my room and let bitterness take over. I remember one day, I asked my mom why I had to be this way. And she cried with me, but she also told me something that stuck. "Nick, you may not have arms and legs, but you can decide what kind of life you will live." At first, I didn't understand it. What kind of life could I live like this? But over time, I realized she was right. I had no power over the body I was given, but I had total power over the spirit I would carry. When you shift your focus from what you don't control to what you do, everything changes. I couldn't control whether people bullied me, but I could control whether I let their words define me. I couldn't control whether I could climb a tree or kick a ball, but I could control whether I let creativity find new ways for me to experience life. I couldn't control the stares, but I could choose to smile back. Those choices didn't erase the pain, but they gave me power. They reminded me that I wasn't helpless. One of the first times I learned the power of choosing my response was when I decided to try swimming. Think about it, no arms, no legs, only a little flipper at the bottom of my torso. Everyone thought I was crazy. People said, "Nick, you'll sink, don't even try." And you know what? The first time I did sink, but I decided that failure wasn't going to be the last word. I tried again and again. And eventually I learned not only how to stay afloat, but how to move with freedom in the water. The pool became my playground. I couldn't change the fact that my body was different, but I chose to respond with determination instead of defeat. Life doesn't ask your permission before it throws challenges at you. You don't get to vote on whether heartbreak, loss, sickness, or rejection comes your way, but you do get to decide what happens next. Will you become bitter, or will you become better? Will you let your circumstance define your identity, or will you let your identity define how you face your circumstance? I remember when I started traveling to speak in different countries. There were times when I faced exhaustion, jet lag, language barriers, and crowds so big they were overwhelming. And there were times I thought, why am I doing this? I don't have to put myself through this. But then I'd see someone in the audience crying because they felt hope for the first time in years. And in that moment, I remembered that my response to discomfort could change someone else's life. Choosing courage over comfort allowed me to reach people I never could have imagined. Even in my personal life, I had to choose my response daily. When I was single, I often felt lonely. I thought I'd never get married, never have someone who truly loved me. That thought could have led me into despair, but instead I chose to believe that if I kept living with hope, if I kept building a life of purpose, love would come at the right time, and it did. My wife is proof that sometimes you can't choose when love comes, but you can choose not to close your heart before it does. Choosing your response doesn't mean pretending everything is fine. It doesn't mean ignoring pain or denying reality. It means facing reality and then deciding what you're going to do with it. Pain can make you bitter, or it can make you stronger. Loneliness can make you hide, or it can make you reach out. Rejection can make you quit, or it can make you grow. Every day you are given choices, and those choices determine whether your life shrinks or expands. Today, when people look at me, they see a man without arms and legs. That's the situation. But when I look at me, I see a man who chose to respond with faith, creativity, and courage. That's the decision. And that decision has allowed me to live a life fuller than I ever dreamed possible. So let me tell you this, you can't always choose your situation. You can't always control what happens to you, but you can always choose how you will respond. And the moment you realize that you are no longer a victim of your circumstances, you become the author of your story. And that story, if you choose wisely, can be one of victory, not defeat. When I was younger, I thought my story was nothing but a tragedy. I believed it was a story that nobody would want to hear, a story that only brought pity or discomfort. I mean, who wants to listen to a boy with no arms and no legs talk about how hard life is? For a long time, I carried shame about who I was. I wished I could hide. I thought my life was worthless. But I want you to know something powerful. The very story I once wanted to bury has become the very thing that gives others strength to keep going. I'll never forget the first time I shared my testimony in front of a small group of high school students. My heart was pounding, my voice was shaking, and I thought, they're going to laugh. They're going to look at me and wonder what's wrong with me. But instead, as I spoke, I saw tears in their eyes. And after I finished, one student came up to me and said, "Nick, I was planning to give up on life. But after hearing you, I realized if you can stand here with joy, then maybe I can make it too." In that moment, I understood something I had never seen before. My story of survival wasn't just for me. It was for them. You see, your story, yes, yours, is more powerful than you think. The struggles you've endured, the pain you've survived, the obstacles you've climbed over, they can all become someone else's source of hope. People connect with honesty, not perfection. Nobody is inspired by a flawless life because nobody lives one. But when you share your scars, when you open up about the nights you cried yourself to sleep, or the moments you thought it was all over, that's when people see themselves in you. And when they see you still standing, they begin to believe maybe they can stand too. When I travel the world, I meet people in every country who carry their own pain. Some are battling illness, some are grieving loss, some are drowning in loneliness. And many of them feel like nobody understands. But when they hear my story, they suddenly realize they're not alone. They see that if a man without arms and legs can find a way to live with joy, then maybe their own situation is not the end. My survival gives them courage for their own. That's the beauty of sharing our story. It multiplies hope. I remember speaking at a prison once, and a man came up to me afterward. He was covered in tattoos, with a hardened face that told a story of years of pain and regret. But his eyes were soft as he said, "Nick, I thought my life was over. If you can forgive life for how hard it's been, maybe I can forgive myself too." My story gave him permission to believe in second chances. And that's when I realized the purpose of pain is not just to survive it, it's to use it. Your survival might look different from mine. Maybe you've survived a broken marriage, a financial collapse, a diagnosis, or rejection after rejection. Maybe you've walked through seasons where you thought you'd never see the light again. and yet you're here. That survival is not wasted. It is a gift, not only to you, but to others. Someone is waiting for you to speak up, to tell them what you've been through, so they can know they're not the only one. There's a saying I often repeat: your greatest test can become your greatest testimony. What once felt like the end of the road for me has now become the very beginning of thousands of other people's journeys toward hope. And I believe the same is true for you. Don't despise your story. Don't hide it away because it feels too messy or too painful. Bring it into the light, because when you do, you turn pain into purpose. Even in my own home with my wife and children, my story matters. My kids know their dad looks different from other dads. They know I can't throw a ball like others or hold them in my hands. But they also know their dad never gave up and won. Day, when they face their own storms, they'll remember my story. They'll remember that strength doesn't come from having everything. It comes from never letting go of hope. And so tonight, I want you to realize this: your story of survival is not just your story. It belongs to the people who will hear it, the ones who will see your scars and find healing for their own wounds. You might think your voice is too small, your story too ordinary, but I promise you, someone needs it. Someone is waiting for your survival to light the path for theirs. I never imagined that my life would reach millions of people. I never dreamed that the boy who once begged God to take him away would one day stand on stages across the world speaking life into others. But that's the miracle of sharing your survival. What once made you weep can one day make others rise. So don't be afraid of your story. Don't bury it, share it. Because you never know who might be clinging to their last thread of hope, waiting for your survival to remind them that theirs is possible too. When I look back at my life, I see a boy who once thought he had no future. I see a teenager who almost gave up, a young man who cried out, "Why me?" But I also see how every tear, every scar, every unanswered question became part of a bigger story, one filled with purpose, one filled with joy, one filled with hope. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's this: hope is not just for the strong, the successful, or the lucky. Hope is for anyone who refuses to quit, anyone who dares to believe that their story isn't over yet. Hope doesn't mean life will be easy. It doesn't mean the pain disappears, but it does mean that even in your darkest valley, there is still light ahead. Hope gives you the strength to stand when everything around you says fall. It gives you courage to smile when all you want to do is cry. And it gives you faith to dream when the world tells you to settle. I stand here, not because I have all the answers, but because I chose not to give up when I had every reason to. And I want you to know, you can make that choice too. Whatever you're facing tonight, it is not the end. Your setback is a setup for something greater, and your story, just like mine, can inspire someone else to keep going. So hold on, don't let go. Choose hope again and again, because when you do, you'll see that life without arms and legs can still be full, meaningful, and beautiful. And if that's true for me, it can be true for you too. Thank you for listening. Thank you for believing in hope. And thank you for reminding me by your presence here tonight that none of us are ever alone.